Welcome back to MSSO seminar. I'm going to be talking about adding and subtracting fractions. So this is going to be the intersection of a couple topics that we covered before. Equivalent fractions, greatest common factors, least common multiples. All of those are going to come into play and they're all going to work together to kind of help you solve this problem. Or problems like this when you're adding a fraction to another fraction, or even if you're adding a fraction to another number. I'm going to show a few examples of that later on. So to start, 1/2 plus 3/5. So I'm going to spoil it for you. You actually cannot add these as they are. Why not? Well, there's a compatibility issue where they have to have the same denominator. So we're going to have to resize both of these to become a fraction that is still equivalent, but they share a common denominator. So what I like to do first is I like to find the LCD, which is also the LCM. Least common denominator is the least common multiple. 2 and 5 are different enough. They're both prime numbers, so they're not composite of each other, and they don't share any multiples. So they have no greatest common factor between them. So the least common multiple and the lowest common denominator is just multiplying the two together. 2 times 5 is 10. So our lowest common denominator is 10, meaning we want to resize both of these fractions to have a denominator of 10. Let me write this one in the corner for later. So what I like to do is I like to rewrite the problem and leave a little bit of space. Make like a big fraction bar. Because now, how can we make this into a 10? Well, we can multiply it by 5. We can multiply this by 5. So whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. Likewise, in the denominator here, whatever we have here, we want to make into 10. So how do we do that? We multiply by 2. Well, if I multiply this by 2, I have to multiply that by 2 also. So what will that become? This becomes 5 over 10. And this becomes 6 over 10. So now that they have the same denominator, what you're really doing is you're adding the numerators together. 5 plus 6 is 11 over 10. So by using equivalent fractions, least common multiples, we can get 11 over 10. Greatest common factor didn't really come into play there, but let's see where this goes. Actually, I'm going to come up with a different one. How about 4 over 9 plus 5 over 12. So now we cannot add these just yet. Let's make this a subtraction problem. We cannot subtract these just yet. Why not? They have to have the same denominator. To find the same denominator is finding the least common multiple. So like we talked about before, we want to find the multiples of 9, which is 3 times 3. We want to find the multiples of 12, which is 4 times 3. 3 is prime, 4 is not. So let's break that down more. So we're comparing 3 times 3 and 2 times 2 times 3. So what is the common multiple? Well, they both have a 3, and then these are the uncommon pieces. So I'm only going to list that common factor once, and now I'm going to list all the uncommon factors. 3, 2, and 2. Now, we multiply this out to find what our lowest common denominator is. 3 times 3 is 9. Actually, let's carry this over. 2 times 2 is 4. 9 times 4 is 36. So how do we rescale these into its equivalent fractions to make them compatible with each other? Well, we need to both make their denominators 36. Here I kind of spoiled it. 9 times 4 is 36. So how do I make this into a 36? Multiply by 4, which means I have to multiply the top by 4 also. How do I make this into a 36? Multiply by 3, multiply by 3. And if you notice, this part here is 12. 3 times 2 times 2 is 12. So I'm just missing that extra 3. So I'm going to write that out. And now 4 times 4 is 16, 9 times 4 is 36. That's 15 and 36. Now that they have the same denominator, you just combine the fractions using whatever operation you have here. This one's subtraction. 16 minus 15 is 1, and then you keep the denominator the same. So by using equivalent fractions, greatest common factor, and least common multiple, you can simplify all of these into the result. First, you have to find lowest common denominator, which is the lowest common multiple. And once you resize each fraction, then you can go about the operation that it's talking about. I'm probably going to show more examples as we go forward and later when we get into more complicated problems. But this is the basic idea of how to add and subtract fractions. And I'll catch you next time.